I would like to invite the speaker who represents the policy making, so more he's going to be able to share. He's been a part of it. He's worked as a researcher for Ministry of Finance, Government of India, so he understands more how the policy framework also functions. Inviting our speaker, Dr. Amir Ullah, who heads the Glocal University in Saharanpur in India. He has led the policy and research at the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. He is a former director and fellow at the India Development Foundation. He has worked as researcher for the Ministry of Finance, Government of India, the UNDP Project Large, that is legal adjustments and reforms for globalizing the economy. He teaches a course on the Indian economic policy at the Indian School of Business in Hyderabad and at the Indian Institute of Foreign Trade in Delhi. So inviting his views, one of course as a researcher, as a teacher, and being a part to some extent in the policy framework also.
Thank you, ma'am. I have some minus 7 minutes to speak for, so. Dr. Vitamin, it was fascinating listening to that really well put out treatise on how hubs work, and some of us are doing that bit. You will be happy to see the work we've done, and we will only be too happy to learn from you in terms of how we can take that forward. That's really something that's very, very critical. It's a tough act following Dr. Raj Singh. I've heard him a few times, and his clarity on this issue of higher education is just amazing in terms of the number of issues that he's highlighted with exactly what the problem is. I just couldn't get the Anil Gupta debate, and where did it go wrong? I thought he was making some point that from an industry perspective, so I didn't quite follow it. But very simply, what I wanted to say today was that if we have to make excellence work, and that's precisely what I'm talking about, then the first thing that we look for in the university system is incentivizing research. You know, it's a very simple thing that I say, but actually in our university system there's absolutely no incentive for research, and therefore you will find that our much heralded IITs and IIMs, and if I somehow quote Jairam Ramesh, who said that our IITs are useless, and he said it because they produce no research. All the IIMs produce very poor quality research, if at all they do. And the reason is that there is really no incentive for doing research in the university system in India. All of us professors, we know that you perform well in class, get reasonably decent feedback, and that's it. And there is very little else to do in that path to becoming whatever you become after a professor. And that's the reason we have, when we look at most of our ranking systems, even the more scientifically designed ranking system, you will find that while we will have a big ranking industry in India, and I must say that some of it is really well designed, but when we go on to the international level, then we will find that we do horribly badly. In no ranking will we find any Indian institution, not even these highly acclaimed IIMs and IITs. Some Asian ranking that came up had IIT Kanpur or Kharagpur at 30. And in Asia, right, just in Asia. In the world ranking, no one, absolutely none. And you can go back, you can blame the ranking system, but that is churlish. So that's really the first big point, that we do not have a research mechanism in India. There is no incentive for research, and therefore none of us do any research. The second is that, and again Dr. Singh talked about it, Anil talked about it earlier, is that there is really no interdisciplinary approach. We do have some lip service we pay to this, but much of that, and I was part of that study, the McKinsey study, which found that 25% is earlier when we first did it, it was about 28%, and it came down to some 22%. The point is not that 22, 25. The honest point is that it is very difficult to hire a fresher from any college in India, even if she is my student. So, because there is very little that she will tell you at the interview, there is very little that she knows when she comes out fresh out of college, and the industry expectations are high because we do not really want to wait for someone to learn on the job, except for some firms. And there was this other study that we did following that McKinsey study, where we found that, say, an institution like L&T in the year 2003 was spending about 200 crore rupees training engineers. NTPC gave me a similar figure, that here were fully trained engineers from then called RECs and NIITs and whatever, and then you had to train them further for a year. Some of those problems were very simple problems, like at L&T, and I saw this, 300 diploma holders together, and they couldn't speak to each other because there was no language that was common to them. Forget about English, they didn't even know Hindi. So there is a serious issue in that, in the sense that when we look at producing graduates for industry, we fall short significantly. And that is something that we need to correct. Some of us are doing that. I know that the Ansal University does it in a big way. And that investment is important. It will need some thinking to be able to do that. I was not going to talk about it, but because it came twice or thrice, the third point I wanted to mention was the high level of fee. And this I am not talking as the head of an institution, but I am talking of high fees as a pure, simple economics teacher. And Dr. Raj Singh pointed it out, though he didn't explain that. He said that if you have an open field, if you have competition, there is no question of profits. All this talk about people making supernormal profits, notice they will only be made in very heavily regulated environment. The real estate lobby, which is the biggest problem in the country right now because of all the profits that it earned because it is such a highly regulated sector with all those zoning problems that Dr. Singh talked about. And therefore you will find that because it is a very highly regulated sector, those of us, and I come from one such institution, lucky enough to get a license to run a university, will charge high fees. Like the telecom sector did earlier, like the automobile sector did earlier, and now the real estate sector does. It is when you open up sectors that prices come down. In simple economic theory, and this among the first courses in economics will tell you, profits are not possible. They are only possible when things are regulated. And that's the bane of policy making in India. One, and these are the two things that we need to teach our policy makers. They don't know what costing is, and therefore they don't know what the difference between fixed costs and variable costs and marginal costs are. Therefore they will tell you that I charge 3,000 rupees per student and you charge 3 lakhs. No, and the point that he made, that they won't talk about the 40 lakhs of land prices, the 60 lakhs of bribe that you have to pay, the huge cost that you pay to teachers, which are very subsumed in all that costing. So it's a serious problem, and that explains a lot of the problem that India has in the manner in which it accounts and costs its prices, and therefore is not competitive with China or any other country. So the high fee issue is really an issue that competition will bring down. We have 650 odd universities in India. The number keeps going up every month or so, marginally. Is that a lot of universities? Certainly not. For a country which has a gross enrollment ratio anywhere between 10 to 18%, we are less than half of where we should be. If the US can have 3,000 universities and China can have some 4,000, why can't India have 10,000 universities? What's the problem with having too many universities? They will close down if they are bad. We did that to schools, and therefore you have this ridiculous system where class 1 student, 4-year student has to be tested to be admitted into a reasonable school, or where Delhi University has to say that the cutoff, and you will be fascinated by this very Indian thing, that the cutoff to join certain courses is, and this is true, 100%, right? And that's because we don't have seats. And that's because we think that profit making is bad and private institutions shouldn't come in and so on. So, as I said, I say this as an economist and not as somebody who runs a private institution. And that's the last point I want to make. And that is, again, it repeats what Dr. Singh said, that if our public universities, if our state universities are atrocious, and when we name those, these are standard jokes that have you passed from Meerut University or some university. Everybody laughs at the names of some 300 odd universities that we have. The point is that our private universities are really not any better. And therefore it is a common problem. It's not a state versus non-state university. We provide poor quality education at very low prices in state universities, and we provide poor quality education at very high prices in private institutions. That's the problem. And the reason, and to my mind, the big reason for that, again, going back to my work as an economist over the last few years, that's because of the phenomenal growth that India has seen in the last 20 years. A growth record of more than 5.5% from 1991, unbroken till 2013, is something that the world has never seen. The only other country that fits into this category is China. And China is a useless country. It's not a democracy. It's not a free market economy. So we don't talk about China. They've done better. But nobody has done as well as India has. And when you grow at 9%, you need a lot of people. You need many more than the 500,000 engineers we deliver every year. So therefore what happened was that you had to churn out people who at least had a certification, if not the skill. So there was a demand, and our demand was, as rightly said, driven by jobs. Therefore, the entire entire ambition of higher education became putting somebody into a seat somewhere, into a job somewhere. Placements became the reason why most of us were in business. It wasn't about raising the level of education. It wasn't about answering questions that industry has to ask us. And that is why you will find that this whole industry academia distaste towards each other. I think, and I'm often very, very snobbish on this, that I get industry experts to come and talk. This chap comes and gives a brilliant talk, all for 20 minutes. After that, he has nothing else to say. So I sneer at him, saying that, what does he know? How can he teach a whole course? He knows, he's done something somewhere and has talked about it for 20 minutes. The industry chap looks at me and finds that I know nothing about what is going on in the rest of the world. I am teaching stuff that was taught 30, 40, 50 years ago. And my whole purpose is to ensure that these 5 people graduate after 6 months. I don't really care whether they go and add value to the industry or not. And therefore, we have this constant problem. And there's very little that we've done to solve this. In my opinion, the only way it can be solved is when we do collaborative research. How we will do that and so on is for another day. Thank you.